Emma was 8 years old when she first walked into Aunt Margaret's bakery on Rosewood Street. The little shop smelled like heaven itself. Warm butter mixed with sweet cinnamon filled the air. There was something else too, something magical that Emma could not name. The bell above the door made a gentle sound as Emma stepped inside. Her eyes grew wide as she looked round. Shelves lined the walls, filled with fresh bread and pastries. The wooden floors creaked softly under her small feet. Everything felt warm and welcoming. "Come here, little one," Aunt Margaret called from behind the counter. Her grey hair was pulled back in a neat bun. White flour dusted her blue apron like snow. Her kind eyes sparkled as she smiled at Emma. "Would you like to help me this morning?" Emma nodded eagerly. She had been waiting for this moment all week. Every summer, her mother would drop her off at the bakery before going to work. Emma loved these visits more than anything else in the world. These were her golden days, and Margaret brought over a wooden stool and placed it beside the large mixing table. Emma climbed up carefully. From here, she could see everything her aunt was doing. She watched with wonder as Aunt Margaret rolled out soft, white dough for her famous cinnamon rolls. The whole town knew about Margaret's cinnamon rolls. They were legendary. Every morning, people would line up outside the bakery before the sun came up. They all wanted to buy the rolls. While they were still warm from the oven, the sweet smell would drift down the street and wake people from their sleep. And Margaret, Emma would ask every single day, "Can you please teach me how to make them?" Her aunt would pause in her work. She would look down at Emma with that mysterious smile she always wore. Then she would pat Emma's head gently with her flour-covered hand. "Someday, dear one, when you are ready to understand what makes them truly special." Emma thought it was just about mixing flour and sugar. She watched her aunt measure ingredients carefully. She saw how Margaret kneaded the dough until it was smooth. She noticed how her aunt rolled it out and sprinkled it with cinnamon and brown sugar. It looked simple enough to Emma, but she did not know then that some recipes carry much more than just ingredients. She did not understand that the most important things cannot be measured in cups or spoons. The bakery became Emma's safe place. At home, her parents sometimes argued. Their voices would get loud and angry. Emma would hide in her room during these times, but in the bakery, everything was peaceful. She would dream about the warm kitchen where Aunt Margaret hummed old songs while she worked. The older woman never rushed. No matter how busy the bakery got, she never raised her voice. Even when customers were impatient, she moved around the kitchen like she was dancing. Her hands worked the dough with such care and love. Everything she touched seemed to become more beautiful. Emma loved to watch her aunt work. Margaret would measure flour into a big white bowl. She would crack eggs with one hand, never breaking the yolks. She would pour milk that was just the right temperature. Every movement was graceful and sure. The secret, Aunt Margaret would whisper sometimes, leaning down close to Emma's ear, is not just in what you put in. It is in why you are making them. Emma would nod as if she understood. But really, she had no idea what her aunt meant. She thought recipes were about following directions. She thought baking was about measuring things correctly. She was too young to understand that the most important ingredient was something that could not be bought at any store. During lunch breaks, Emma and her aunt would sit together at a small table in the back of the shop. They would share warm rolls fresh from the oven. The pastries were golden brown and perfect. Sweet cinnamon and butter would melt on Emma's tongue. "These are the best in the whole world," Emma would say with her mouth full. Aunt Margaret would laugh softly. "That is because they are made with love, little one." Emma did not fully understand what that meant either. She just knew that whenever she bit into one of those golden, spiral pastries, She felt completely loved. She felt safe and happy. All her worries would disappear with each sweet bite. The afternoons would pass quickly. Emma would help sweep flour from the floor. She would wipe down tables and arrange cookies in the display case. Every task felt important when she did it with her Aunt Dot as the day ended. Emma's mother would come to pick her up. Emma never wanted to leave. She would hug Aunt Margaret tightly and promise to come back tomorrow. "I will be here," her aunt would say, "and maybe tomorrow you will learn something new about what makes these rolls so special." Emma would walk home thinking about the secret recipe. She dreamed of the day when she would finally be old enough to understand. She had no idea that some secrets take a lifetime to learn. She did not know that the most precious recipes are not written down on paper. They live in the heart. Everything changed the summer Emma turned 15. She woke up that morning feeling excited about another day at the bakery. She had been looking forward to helping Aunt Margaret with the morning ranch, but when she came downstairs for breakfast, she knew something was wrong. Her mother Helen was standing by the kitchen window. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest. Her face looked hard and angry in a way Emma had never seen before. The usual morning warmth was gone from the kitchen. "Mom, are you ready to drive me to the bakery?" Emma asked cheerfully. Helen turned round slowly. Her eyes were red and puffy. It looked like she had been crying all night. "You will not be going to the bakery anymore," she said in a voice that was cold and final. Emma felt confused. "What do you mean?" "I go every day during summer holidays." "Not anymore." "I do not want you going there anymore," Helen said firmly. Her hands were shaking slightly as she spoke. Emma felt her stomach drop. "But why?" "Mom, I love helping Aunt Margaret. She is teaching me so many things about baking." Helen's face became even tighter. "Your aunt and I have had a falling out. It is better if you stay away from her." Emma could not believe what she was hearing. Her mother and Aunt Margaret had always been so close. They were sisters who talked on the phone every day. They shared recipes and laughed together at family gatherings. Emma had never seen them argue about anything. "What kind of falling out?" Emma asked. "Can you not just talk to her and fix it? Some things cannot be fixed." "Emma, this is one of them." Emma felt her world beginning to crack apart. The bakery was her favorite place in the whole world. Aunt Margaret was like a second mother to her. The thought of never going back there made her feel sick. She tried to get the truth from her mother. But Helen would not explain what had happened. Every question Emma asked was met with silence or anger. Wry words. All Emma knew was that Helen and Margaret, who had been close sisters their whole lives, suddenly could not be in the same room together. That afternoon, Emma went to her bedroom and looked out the window. She could see the bakery down the street. The familiar sign still hung above the door. People were still lining up to buy the famous cinnamon rolls. But something felt different about it now. Emma watched her aunt arrive the next morning at 5 o'clock. Just like always, Margaret looked smaller somehow. Her shoulders were bent forward like she was carrying something heavy. Even from far away, Emma could see that her aunt looked sad and lonely. The cinnamon rolls still brought crowds of customers. The sweet smell still drifted down the street every morning. But when Emma looked through the bakery window, Aunt Margaret seemed different. The joy was gone from the way she moved round the kitchen. Emma tried sneaking out to visit the bakery several times. She would wait until her mother was busy, then slip out the back door. But Helen always found out somehow. She would be waiting at the front door when Emma tried to come home. "I said no. Emma, you are not to go there," Helen would say angrily. "Some wounds are too deep to heal." "But what happened between you and Aunt Margaret?" Emma would plead. Please just tell me what is wrong." Her mother would look away and shake her head. "Something that should have stayed buried. That is all you need to know." Emma felt like she was going crazy. She loved both women so much. She could not understand how they could hurt each other like this. She could not understand why she had to be punished for whatever had happened between them. Weeks turned into months. Emma watched from her window as summer ended and autumn began. The gulf between the sisters seemed to grow wider with each passing day. Emma felt caught in the middle of something she did not understand. She loved them both, but could not reach either of them. Sometimes she would walk past the bakery on her way to school. She would see Aunt Margaret through the window, still making her rolls, still humming her old songs. But the happiness was gone from her movements. Her aunt looked tired and sad. The flour on her apron seemed to weigh her down instead of making her look cheerful. Emma tried talking to her father about it, but he would only shake his head. "This is between your mother and your aunt," he would say. "We must stay out of it." The recipe that had once symbolized love and family traditions now felt like a wall between them all. Emma realized she was not just losing the chance to learn how to bake the famous cinnamon rolls. She was losing the people she loved most in the world. At night, Emma would lie in bed and remember the happy mornings in the bakery. She remembered the smell of fresh bread and the sound of her aunt's gentle voice. She remembered feeling safe and loved in that warm kitchen. Now all of that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The silence between the sisters grew heavier each day. Emma felt like she was watching her family break apart piece by piece. She did not know how to fix it. She did not even know what was broken. 10 years had passed since Emma last stepped foot in her hometown. She had become a successful chef in London, working in some of the finest restaurants in the city. Her hands could create beautiful dishes that made people close their eyes with pleasure. She could prepare complex sauces and delicate pastries that earned praise from food critics. But there was one thing Emma could never recreate, no matter how hard she tried. Those magical cinnamon rolls from her childhood remained a mystery. She had attempted the recipe hundreds of times in her professional kitchen. She used the best ingredients money could buy. She followed every technique she had learned in culinary school, but every attempt fell short of the memory that lived in her heart. The rolls she made were good. Her colleagues at the restaurant often complimented her baking skills, but they were not the same. They did not have that special something that made her feel loved and safe. They did not carry the magic she remembered from Aunt Margaret's kitchen. Emma had given up trying to understand what she was missing. She told herself it was just childhood nostalgia making the memory seem better than reality. But deep down, she knew there was something more to those rolls that she could not capture. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Emma was working late in the restaurant kitchen when her mobile rang. The number looked familiar, but she could not place it at first. "Emma, dear, this is Mrs. Cooper from back home," said a voice that sounded much older than Emma remembered. Mrs. Cooper had been their neighbor when Emma was growing up. Double quotes, Mrs. Cooper. "How lovely to hear from you," Emma said, stepping away from the busy kitchen. "How did you get my number?" "Your father gave it to me, dear. I am calling about your Aunt Margaret." Mrs. Cooper's voice became serious and sad. "She is quite ill. I am afraid. The doctors say she does not have much time left." Emma felt the world stop spinning round her. She had not spoken to Aunt Margaret in 10 years. The family feud had never been resolved. Her mother still refused to talk about what had happened between the sisters. "The bakery is struggling badly," Mrs. Cooper continued. "She has been trying to run it all by herself, but she is too weak now. She is all alone. Emma, she has no one to help her." Emma's heart broke into pieces. She imagined her aunt, now old and sick, still trying to make those famous cinnamon rolls every morning. She pictured the bakery that had once been so full of life and warmth, now empty and failing. "I will be there as soon as I can," Emma said without thinking. She took emergency leave from her job that very night. The next morning, she packed a small bag and drove back to the small town where she had grown up. The journey took several hours, and with each mile, Emma felt more nervous about what she would find. When she finally reached Rosewood Street, her heart sank. The bakery looked tired and forgotten. The bright blue paint was peeling from the walls. The cheerful sign above the door was faded and weathered. Only a few people waited in line. Compared to the crowds she remembered from her childhood, Emma parked her car and walked slowly toward the door. Her hands were shaking as she pushed it open. The bell above the door still made that gentle sound. But it seemed quieter now. Inside, the bakery looked much smaller than she remembered. The wooden floors were worn smooth in places. Some of the shelves looked empty, but the smell was still there. Warm butter, sweet cinnamon, and that magical something that could not be named. "Emma," came a voice from behind the counter. Emma looked up to see Aunt Margaret emerging from the kitchen. The older woman looked so much frailer than Emma had expected. Her grey hair was thinner now, and her blue apron hung loosely on her smaller frame, but her eyes still held that familiar warmth that Emma remembered so well. "Emma, my dear girl," Aunt Margaret said with wonder in her voice. "You came back to me." Emma rushed round the counter and hugged her aunt carefully. Margaret felt so fragile in her arms, like she might break if Emma squeezed too hard. Both women had tears in their eyes. "I want to help you, Aunt Margaret," Emma said firmly. "Let me work with you again. We can save the bakery together." For a moment, hope flickered in the older woman's eyes. Emma could see her aunt imagining them working side by side again, just like in the old days. But then Margaret's expression changed. She pulled back and shook her head sadly. "It is too late for that, love," she said in a voice full of regret. "No, it is not too late," Emma insisted. "Please, just teach me the recipe for the cinnamon rolls. I am a professional chef now. I can help you make the bakery successful again." And Margaret's face suddenly hardened. The warmth left her eyes, and was replaced by something cold and bitter. Some things should die with their creators, Emma. That recipe carries too much pain now. Emma was confused and hurt by her aunt's reaction. She had expected Margaret to be happy to see her. She had thought her aunt would welcome the help. This was not about ingredients anymore. Emma could sense that something deeper was happening here. Something had been eating away at her aunt for years. "What happened between you and Mum?" Emma asked as gently as she could, and Margaret turned away toward the kitchen. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of old memories. Some secrets are too heavy to share, even with those we love most. Emma realized then that her aunt was not just protecting a recipe, she was protecting herself from more heartbreak. And Margaret passed away quietly on a Tuesday morning, just as the first batch of cinnamon rolls finished baking in the oven. Emma had been staying at the bakery for 2 weeks, trying to help her aunt with the daily work. She had been sleeping on a small cot in the back room so she could be nearby if Margaret needed anything during the night. That morning, Emma woke up to the familiar smell of baking rolls. For a moment, she felt happy. It seemed like her aunt was feeling better and had gotten up early to start the day's work. But when Emma walked into the kitchen, she found Margaret sitting peacefully in her favorite wooden chair. Her eyes were closed, and a gentle smile was on her face. Margaret had passed away surrounded by the smell that had defined both their lives. The kitchen was warm from the oven, and golden rolls were cooling on the counter. It was exactly how her aunt would have wanted to leave this world, in the place she loved most. doing the work that had brought joy to so many people. Emma called for help, but she already knew it was too late. She sat beside her aunt for a long time, holding her hand and remembering all the happy mornings they had shared in this very kitchen. The cinnamon rolls continued to cool on the counter. Perhaps the last batch Margaret would ever make, the funeral, was held 3 days later in the small church at the end of Rosewood Street. Emma was surprised by how many people came to say goodbye. The church was nearly full of townspeople who had eaten Margaret's rolls over the years. They all had stories about her kindness and the way her baking had made their mornings. Right at dot Emma noticed her mother Helen standing at the very back of the church. Helen looked older than Emma remembered. Her face was pale and drawn with grief. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the minister spoke about Margaret's life and the love she had shared through her baking. Mother and daughter did not speak during the service. Emma wanted to go to her mother, but she was not sure if Helen would welcome her. The years of silence between the family had created a wall that felt impossible to cross. But Emma could see her mother's regret written in every line of her face. Helen's shoulders shook with quiet sobs as they lowered Margaret's coffin into the ground. A week after the funeral, Emma met with Mr. Peterson, the family lawyer. She was shocked to learn that Margaret had left the entire bakery to her, the building, the equipment, the recipes she did have written down. Everything now belonged to Emma. Your aunt was very specific about this, Mr. Peterson explained. She said you were the only one who truly understood what the bakery meant. Emma felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. She also felt honored that her aunt had trusted her with something so precious. But she still did not have the one thing she wanted most, the secret recipe for those magical cinnamon rolls. Emma decided to stay in town for a few more weeks to clean out Margaret's personal belongings. The small apartment above the bakery was filled with memories. There were old photographs on every surface, showing Margaret and Helen as young women, laughing together at family gatherings. Emma worked slowly through each room. She packed away clothes and books, kitchen tools and keepsakes. Everything seemed ordinary until she reached Margaret's bedroom closet, hidden behind some old coats. Emma found a wooden box she had never seen before. The box was heavy and looked very old. The wood was dark with age, and the metal hinges creaked when Emma opened it. She expected to find recipes or baking notes inside. Instead, she found something that broke her heart. The box was filled with letters, dozens and dozens of them. They were all addressed to Helen in Margaret's careful handwriting, but none of them had ever been mailed. The envelopes were sealed but never sent. Some were yellow with age, while others looked much newer. Emma sat on Margaret's bed and began to read with trembling hands. The first letter was dated 15 years ago, right around the time the family feud had begun. My dearest sister Helen, it began. I am so sorry for what I said about David at Sunday dinner. I was wrong to interfere in your marriage. I was just trying to protect you because I love you. But I see now that I drove you away instead. Please forgive me. Emma's heart ached as she read letter after letter. Each one was an apology, a plea for forgiveness, or simply news about daily life that Margaret had wanted to share with her sister. Margaret had written about the changing seasons, about customers who asked after Helen, about how much she missed their long phone conversations. One letter, dated just a few months ago, made Emma cry openly. I miss you so much, Helen. I watch Emma from my kitchen window sometimes, hoping she will visit the bakery. She looks just like you did when you were her age. I want to give her the recipe for our cinnamon rolls. But how can I pass on something made with love when my own heart is so broken? As Emma read through all the letters, she finally understood the truth. The family secret was not about the recipe at all. Years ago, Margaret had tried to warn Helen about David's drinking problem. She had seen how it was affecting the family, and had spoken up out of love and concern. But Helen had felt attacked and embarrassed. She had chosen to defend her husband and cut off all contact with her sister. Both women had been too proud and hurt to apologize. They had let their stubbornness destroy their relationship. The recipe had died with Margaret not because she was selfish or cruel. It had died because Margaret could not bear to share something so precious while carrying such deep pain in her heart. How could she pass on a recipe made with love when her own heart was broken by the loss of her sister? Emma clutched the letters to her chest and wept for all the lost years, all the words that should have been spoken, and all the love that had been wasted on pride and misunderstanding. Emma made a decision that would honor both her aunt's memory and heal her broken family. She would not search for the exact recipe that had died with Margaret. Instead, she would recreate the magic through something more powerful: love, community, and forgiveness. The next morning, Emma cleaned the bakery from top to bottom. She scrubbed the old wooden floors until they gleamed. She polished the display cases and washed every mixing bowl and baking pan. The familiar motions felt like a prayer, a way of preparing the space for something new to begin. When she was finished cleaning, Emma put a sign in the window that read "Help Wanted. Share your memories." Then she opened the door and waited to see what would happen. The first person to come was old Mr. Thompson. He had been buying Margaret cinnamon rolls for 30 years. His weathered hands shook slightly as he held his cup of tea. "I remember those rolls had something special in them," he said thoughtfully. "There was always a hint of orange zest, just a tiny bit, but it made all the difference." Margaret used to grate fresh orange peel into the filling. Emma wrote down every word. She thanked Mr. Thompson and gave him a cup of tea and a slice of regular bread. But she promised him that soon there would be cinnamon rolls again. The next day, young Lucy came by with her grandmother. Lucy was only 12 years old, but she had loved Margaret's rolls since she was tiny. They always had the most perfect crispy bottom, Lucy said with excitement. "My grandmother would let me eat that part first because it was my favorite. The top was soft and gooey, but the bottom was golden and crunchy." Emma smiled and made another note. She was beginning to see that the secret was not in one special ingredient. It was in all the small details that made each roll perfect. Mrs. Davis, who ran the flower shop next door, stopped by later that week. She had been Margaret's friend for many years and had watched her work countless times. The filling spiraled perfectly through each bite. Mrs. Davis remembered Margaret had a special way of rolling the dough, not too tight, not too loose. She would roll it just enough so that every piece had the right amount of cinnamon and sugar. Day after day, people came to share their memories. The baker from the next town over remembered that Margaret always let her dough rise twice. The school teacher recalled that the rolls were always perfectly golden brown, never too light or too dark. The postman mentioned that they smelled like heaven from 2 blocks away. Emma listened to every story and wrote down every detail. Then she began to experiment. She worked alone in the kitchen after the bakery closed, trying to recreate what everyone remembered. She failed many times. Some rolls were too sweet, others not sweet enough. Some were too dense, others too light and airy. But Emma did not give up. Each failure taught her something new. She learned how the dough should feel under her hands. She discovered the right temperature for the oven and the perfect timing for each step. Most importantly, she learned that the magic came not from following rules, but from putting love into every emotion. The townspeople became her partners in this journey. They would stop by during the day to offer encouragement and test each new attempt. Even when the rolls were not quite right, people would smile and tell Emma she was getting closer. You have your aunt's spirit, Mrs. Davis would say. That is the most important ingredient of all. After 3 months of trying, Emma finally created rolls that made people close their eyes in happiness when they tasted them. The entire bakery fell silent as the first customers bit into the warm pastries. Then, one by one, smiles spread across their faces. "These are wonderful," old Mr. Thompson said with tears in his eyes. "They taste like home." The rolls were not exactly like Margaret's. Emma knew that. They were her own creation, made with the same love but shaped by her own journey and the memories of an entire community. Emma decided to have a grand reopening of the bakery. She spent a week preparing for the special day. She cleaned every surface until it sparkled. She arranged fresh flowers in the windows and polished the old wooden sign above the door. On the morning of the reopening, Emma was in the kitchen arranging the first batch of warm rolls in the display case. The smell filled the entire bakery and drifted out onto the street. She felt nervous and excited at the same time. The bell above the door chimed, and Emma looked up expecting to see her first customer of the day. Instead, she saw her mother Helen standing in the doorway. Helen looked uncertain and afraid, as if she was not sure she was welcome. "That smell," Helen whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "It is just like Margaret's rolls." Emma walked round the counter carrying a plate with one perfect warm roll on it. She could see the pain and regret in her mother's face. She could also see the love that had never died, despite all the years of silence. "No, Mum," Emma said gently, offering the plate to her mother. "It is like ours now." Helen took the roll with shaking hands. Mother and daughter sat together at a small table by the window. They shared the pastry and finally shared the tears they had held back for too long. Emma showed her mother all of Margaret's letters. Helen read each one and sobbed for her lost sister and the stubborn pride that had kept them apart for so many years. "She never stopped loving you," Emma said softly. "Nor I her." Helen replied through her tears. "I was such a fool. I let my pride destroy the most important relationship in my life." The bakery began to thrive again, not because Emma had found Margaret's exact recipe, but because she had found something more valuable. She had found the courage to forgive, the strength to begin again, and the wisdom to let love rise like dough in a warm place. Emma hung a new sign above the counter that read "Made with love, shared with hope." Every morning, as she rolled out dough for her cinnamon rolls, Emma could feel both her mother's support and her aunt's blessing surrounding her. The recipe had been transformed from a secret that divided the family into a gift that united them all.